Imagine being the couple everyone swore was goals, and then waking up to find your love story reduced to court dates, filings, and a calendar full of deadlines. One day before the first gavel was set to drop, Joshua Jackson and Jodie Turner-Smith did something no one expected. They hit pause. Not on parenting, not on each other's careers. They hit pause on the trial itself, pulled it right off the calendar, and chose a different battleground: a conference table, a private judge, and a custody judgment negotiated behind closed doors. The headlines called it a twist, but twists don't happen by accident. They happen when something deeper shifts, when two people decide that peace is worth more than spectacle. And that's where this story really begins. It's easy to forget that, not long ago, these two were the definition of red carpet electricity. The kind of couple who turned the Met Gala into a movie scene, who floated through the BAFTAs in quiet lockstep, who didn't just match outfits, they matched energy. Their story seemed simple: a whirlwind 2019 wedding, a baby, a glow, a modern fairy tale, right up until real life knocked. So how did we get from the night they couldn't stop gazing at each other on those famous museum steps, to a courtroom countdown with dates circled in red? And what changed in the final hours that made them call it all off? Let's rewind the film. It started with a breakup that wasn't built to be messy. Jodie filed in late 2023, and by May 2025, the divorce was settled. Not the scream in the street kind, not the scorched earth kind. They split assets, waived spousal support, and, most importantly, landed on a temporary joint custody setup for their daughter, Juno. On paper, it looked civilized. In real life, it was complicated, because the one thing paper can't measure is time. Time with a 5-year-old doesn't stretch, it splits. And every minute matters when both parents are counting. Then came the spark that turned into smoke: school. That word sounds small until you're trying to co-parent across borders, projects, and a Hollywood shooting schedule that never asks what a 5-year-old needs. Reports claimed Joshua felt blindsided when Jodie enrolled Juno in a new school outside of an agreed-upon commute radius. He filed a motion, the kind that says, "This isn't a suggestion, this is an emergency." Not because he didn't trust her, but because the ground under their daughter's feet suddenly felt like a moving walkway. He wanted the current school locked in for the next academic year. He wanted both signatures on any change. In plain terms, stability, now. But here's the thing about co-parenting when both parents travel for a living. Stability can look different depending on which side of the passport you're standing. Jodie's career often shoots in London. Rumors say she floated the idea that Juno could learn remotely with tutors while traveling. Not to uproot her life, but to keep their daughter close while mom was on a tight schedule. That suggestion can sound radical, or perfectly reasonable, depending on your map of childhood. The clash wasn't fame versus family. It was two versions of love colliding at the school gate. What happened next was quieter, and somehow louder. Letters. Not the kind you write to end something, but to try to protect it. Jodie's words carried this point like a lantern. Juno's time isn't about mom or dad winning. It's about their daughter having a childhood that doesn't feel like a tug of war. She acknowledged Joshua's concerns. She underlined stability. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. Then Joshua answered in kind. He wasn't posturing for a judge. He was telling the truth you only say when the microphones are off. Juno needs both of us. Ideally, equally. That's not strategy. That's a father cutting straight to the bone of the matter. And in the middle of this paperwork storm, Joshua did something that used to be rare for him. He talked publicly about fatherhood. On Jesse Tyler Ferguson's podcast, he pulled the curtain back just an inch. He said what so many dads think and too few say out loud. If he ever did anything to estrange his daughter, he'd be in pieces. He didn't make it a performance. He made it a promise. The kind that sticks to a parent's lungs. The sound of a man who knows that co-parenting isn't an arrangement. It's a responsibility you wake up to every day, even when it hurts. Now, about those trial dates. They were set, October 15th, 17, and 22. 3 checkpoints on the calendar ticking closer. And then, 24 hours before the first one, Jodie's legal team filed to take them off the court's schedule. No last-minute theatrics, no press conference, just a pivot. We're negotiating. We'll return to a privately compensated temporary judge if we hit an impasse. Translation: we're choosing privacy over performance. We're choosing a room with a door over a courtroom with an audience. It was a surrender, but not to each other. To the idea that the best version of this story needs fewer eyes. The internet moved fast, because it always does. Some said it was a sign of reconciliation. Others guessed it was strategy. But if you listen closely, you'll hear something else. Maturity. Not the boring kind, the brave kind. The version where two people who once loved each other loudly now choose to protect their child quietly. Because trials are straight lines. Parenting is a maze. And even when you win a custody trial, something about the family you thought you were building gets smaller. That's a cost. They knew it. They acted like it. Let's pause the storytellers for a minute and sit with the parents. Imagine the logistics, schedules, pre-production calls, flight itineraries, first day of school pictures, the exact timing of snack drop-offs and bedtime stories, FaceTime across time zones. Co-parenting is a choreography you relearn every season. Some days you waltz, some days you trip. And on those days, the only thing that matters is whether you help each other up before your kid notices. This is not the first Hollywood custody fight, but it may be one of the few where both leads seem determined to stay human. That matters. Not because it looks good, but because kids remember tone more than words. They remember if the car rides between homes felt like handoffs or goodbyes. They remember whether the grown-ups made their life smaller or bigger when everything changed. Make no mistake, though, there were sharp edges here. The school dispute cut deep. The idea of remote learning versus a traditional education became a proxy for a bigger fear. What happens when your child's world starts mapping to flight routes? When your daughter's best friend can't keep up with where she'll be next fall? When both parents believe they're choosing stability, but the definitions don't match? That's not a courtroom problem. That's a life problem. And for the sake of one little girl, they chose to solve it like a family, not like a case. If you've followed their arc, you know the images. The private 2019 ceremony, the BAFTA's glow, the Critics' Choice calm, the Met Gala magnetism. Two people moving like they'd rehearsed together. The fashion shifts, the poses change, the camera angles evolve. But the real photograph, the one with no flash, is the 8 a.m. school drop-off, the chorus of "Do you have your backpack?", the last-minute email about art supplies, the first day of a new grade with nervous butterflies and a parent's smiling lie. You're going to love it. This is where their story lives now. Not in a filing cabinet, but in a lunchbox. Behind the scenes, the machine kept spinning. Their careers didn't slow down just because the marriage did. Jodie's slate kept heating up. Joshua kept working. And when he spoke about fatherhood, it didn't sound like a PR strategy. It sounded like a recalibration. A reminder that some jobs don't come with a rap day. Fatherhood is one of them. Motherhood, too. The credits never roll. That's the point. So why cancel the trial now? Because time can be a teacher if you let it. Months of letters and filings and tense text messages can give you the answer a judge could, that there is no perfect custody plan. There is only the best one for your child in this season, and the humility to change it when the season does. This isn't about a trophy labeled primary. It's about a 5-year-old who will one day be 15 and, years after that, 25, and who will remember whether her parents were brave enough to choose cooperation over conclusion. If you're wondering where this leaves them, the answer is clearer than it looks. They're not back together. This isn't a rom-com. It's a new kind of relationship, one that requires more patience than passion, more logistics than roses, more listening than speeches. They will sit across a table and count out days, flights, school weeks, holidays. They will trade hours and makeup time. They will disagree and, when necessary, ask a private judge to thread a needle too fine for either of them to hold alone. But they will do it without an audience. And that choice is a kind of love, too. Love for their daughter's future. Love for the parts of each other that were never meant for public consumption. Remember that photo of them on the Vanity Fair night. Eyes alight, leaning close, the world blurring into bokeh behind them. Freeze frame it. Not because it predicts a reunion, but because it proves something essential. These were two people who once moved through the same story with grace. That muscle memory can be repurposed. It can become, we have different lives now, but we're writing this chapter together, not as lovers, as parents. And listen, co-parenting isn't pretty. It's checking your ego at the door, your calendar at the counter, your temper at the curb. It's telling your friends you can't stay for dessert because it's time to switch houses. It's learning how to say no to a job that would take you too far for too long, or asking your ex for a swap that keeps the week whole. It's learning how to stop calling it my time and start calling it her time. It's learning that the most romantic thing you might do for your child is step out of the spotlight together. Will they nail this? They'll try. They'll fail. They'll try again. And if there's anything this moment teaches us, it's that trying is not a soft option. It's the only one that matters. They sideline the trial not because they're done fighting, but because they're done performing the fight. That's growth. That's grit. And in a town that loves a third act twist, they just wrote one. Here's the last. Quiet truth. When Joshua talked about the unthinkable, about estrangement as a pain he refuses to risk, he wasn't playing to a jury. He was speaking to himself, to the version of him that could get lost in anger or work or pride and forget what anchors him. And when Jodie wrote about framing time as Juno's, about checking their own needs at the door, she wasn't giving up ground. She was drawing a map, different routes, same destination. It won't always be easy, but it can be enough. So yes, the trial's off. The cameras have been pushed back. The judge's bench replaced by a conference table. The script has changed, but the stakes haven't. There's still a 5-year-old at the center of this galaxy, and 2 parents orbiting her with all the imperfect gravity they can muster. Sometimes the bravest choice isn't to stand up in court. It's to sit down together, to write the agreement no one else will ever read, to build a future, one compromise at a time. And if you've ever loved someone and then had to love them differently, if you've ever had to turn romance into responsibility, passion into planning, fireworks into family, you already know how this story ends. Not with a verdict, with a sentence that keeps going, with 3 names on a document that says, "We'll figure it out," because in the end, the only headline that matters is the one a child writes in her memory. My parents showed up. Everything else is just commentary.